Hello, and welcome to ArtistYear Create. My name is Ross Layton. I'm a creative writing fellow with ArtistYear, a national AmeriCorps program that serves students and communities through the expansion of arts education. In this video, we're celebrating Earth Day by writing what we think some part of Earth would say if it could speak. Let's get started. Like I said before, you'll be learning and writing about Earth in this video. But we'll actually start with something else, something called perspective. Perspective, or point of view, is an important thing for writers to think about. When we write a story, for example, we need to know if we're expressing the story's events as a certain person experienced them. We need to know if we're stepping into someone else's shoes, seeing through someone else's eyes. We need to know what perspective or point of view we're telling the story from.
When reading, you can sometimes find the perspective by answering this question: who is I? I is a word we use for ourselves, so once you know who the word I is pointing toward in a story or a poem, you know whose perspective is at play. Let's practice this by looking at part of a poem, Complaint of El Rio Grande by Richard Blanco. Don't stress if it doesn't make much sense. Just follow along as I read the excerpt aloud and think about that question: who is I? I felt the sun flare, praised each star flocked about the moon long before you did. I've breathed air you'll never breathe. Listened to songbirds before you could speak their names, before you dug your oars in me, before you created the gods that created you. What do you think? Who is this poem's I? If you could use a hint, look back at the title. The poem is the Complaint of El Rio Grande, so El Rio Grande is the I. Of course, El Rio Grande isn't really a person. It's the river that separates Mexico from Texas. But we as writers are free to personify it, and imagine its perspective anyway. That's what the poet, Richard Blanco, is doing in this poem. He imagines the river as something that feels, breathes, hears, and even speaks in its own way. His words are what he imagines this river saying. This is what I'll invite you to do in a few minutes. To write, like Blanco, from the point of view of a non-human part of Earth.
What does non-human mean? It means you won't use your own perspective, you won't use any other person's perspective, you won't even use the perspective of anything that people made. These may seem like difficult restrictions, so let's also talk about what does count as non-human, about what points of view you can use. Let's quickly cover what makes up our Earth.
Scientists think of Earth as a group of 4 coexisting spheres. Most of the solid stuff, land, mountains, the seafloor, and more, makes up the lithosphere. The hydrosphere is the water, oceans, lakes, glaciers, clouds. The atmosphere is the air, and the biosphere includes every living thing that knows Earth as home. Richard Blanco chose to write his poem from the point of view of a river, a part of the hydrosphere. What will you choose? Examples from each sphere are on screen, but you can absolutely come up with something else if you want. Only remember, while humans are in the biosphere, they're off limits in this activity. Pause the video here while selecting one perspective to write from, and as you gather your writing tools of choice, whether it's pencil and paper or a device. Alright, have you settled on a non-human part of Earth? Remember, you'll be writing from its perspective. If you're ready, let's move on.
I recommend you write a poem, like Complaint of Rio Grande. It might rhyme, but it doesn't have to, and it doesn't have to be any particular length. The only rule is that you stick with the point of view you've chosen, that you always express that perspective. This means the word I will point only towards the non-human part of Earth you picked, never to yourself.
So, if your chosen point of view is a tree's, for instance, you might begin by writing, "I wave my branches around in the wind." Here, I is the tree. Here are some questions to help you get started. Imagine how the part of Earth you picked would answer them. Then, use the answers as lines in your poem. Where are you? What do you see around you? What do you hear around you? What do you do all day? What's your favorite season, and why? How old are you? How do you feel about humans? You can come up with answers to all, some, or none of these questions. They're here to help you start thinking from the perspective you selected. Once you've done that, you can continue and add whatever thoughts you happen to come up with. Make the poem your own. I suggest you spend about 10 to 15 minutes on this writing activity. You might want to set a timer on your device so you won't lose track of time and write for much longer. To keep the questions on screen while you write, pause here.
Thank you for writing from a non-human point of view with me. I hope you had a good time looking through the eyes of Earth. Happy Earth Day.